she's staring at.
This is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the Fighting Edition. Not to be confused with all those other Power Rangers games that did not have fighting in them, don't be silly. Yes, this was originally exclusive to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, courtesy of Bandai and Natsume, and quite a fun little fighter at that too, but we're not playing that one today. Instead, we're playing the Mega Drive equivalent, a pirate original port brought to you by the same folks who brought you Top Fighter 2000, the bootleg fighting game that allegedly features Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali cast as repurposed King of Fighter equivalents for whatever that's worth. And really, that's the whole selling point of that game, was seeing Jordan and Ali beat the shit out of each other. Except not really, but hey, points for effort I suppose, but I digress. Fighting Edition retains all 8 playable fighters from the SNES original. So your 4 Megazords, Lord Zed, Goldar, and the 2 Monsters of the Week. Ivan Ooze couldn't be bothered to make an appearance here, and I can't say I blame him. You only have 2 modes of play, the single-player arcade mode where you pick a fighter, face off against all the other fighters, and earn a generic ending screen, and the usual 2-player versus mode, so it's missing a couple bits. There's no story mode, there's no trial mode, but how's the fighting in this Fighting Edition of Fighting Power Rangers fighting thing? Well, it's actually not too bad. I wouldn't call it good by any means because there's still quite a bit of jank to be found here, but it's a much better game than I was anticipating, and my expectations were, let's say they were 6 feet deep. The fighting engine itself is rather uncomplicated. You have 2 attack buttons and a third button that alternates between strong attacks and blocking. Yes, you have a block button in this game, even though the original game blocks like most fighting games would by pressing back, but anyway, performing special moves is actually quite simple. You simply hold a direction and press a button to perform a special attack. Whether it be a dashing melee, a projectile attack, teleport, whatever the case may be depends on the fighter, and the fighters more or less retain some of their special moves. I don't want to say all because the SNES Fighting Edition had a somewhat deep fighting system involving power meters and such, and this doesn't quite reach that level of complexity. However, the simplicity of pulling off special moves makes this somewhat accessible to the newbie players. You don't need to learn any button combinations, quarter circles, or anything like that. It's just hold a direction and press a button. Have fun. They'd call this the modern control scheme in most fighting games these days, but I'd imagine those work better than this does. Now let me stress something here. Compared to some other bootleg fighting games I've played on the Mega Drive or even Super Nintendo, Control and Fighting Edition is actually a lot more responsive than one would expect out of this sort of thing. I mean, they're not smooth, but they work more often than not, and that's not something you could say about many of these bootleg fighters. Your expectations do need to be tempered, however. You're not getting a robust fighting engine here, you're getting something very simple and bare bones, with some wonky jumping physics and even wonkier selective collision detection. And since it's very easy to pull off special moves, it actually becomes a bit of a hassle when you just want to throw a punch, because more than likely you'll be holding a direction which will initiate some sort of special attack. That's something you have to be mindful of with this thing. In terms of graphics, well, I gotta admit, Fighting Edition actually looks pretty damn good for the most part, almost looking to be a dead ringer for the SNES original, although not quite. Obviously, there's some color differences, sprite animation isn't quite as smooth, there's some missing details here and there, and the backdrops are largely static pieces with little to nothing going on. But generally speaking, if you were to look at this game through screenshots, they'd almost come across as authentic. And even the frame rate is pretty solid. It's not silky smooth, mind you, but it's nowhere near as choppy as some of these other bootleg fighters I've come across, and that's something I wasn't really expected. It's to be commended actually, this fairly smooth enough frame rate. I'll give this game credit for that much and the generally decent visuals. Sound-wise, it's a mixed bag. There's a lot of stock music being used here, some of which has been heard in other games. There is some semblance of the Go-Go Power Rangers theme in there, but that's only because that's one of the many stock songs that get recycled in these games, and this is the one time where you had a song that actually fits the material. Sound effects are also pretty stock sounding. I don't know why the Megazords have a death grunt, but there you go, that's a thing. Whatever. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Fighting Edition for the Sega Mega Drive is a strange beast in that it's an admirable attempt, amazingly enough, at replicating and recreating the SNES original and not quite going all the way. There's some stuff missing here and there, but also does a couple things here and there that makes it somewhat easier to play. And the game itself, while not smooth and still fairly jank, is actually a more functional fighting game by bootleg standards than some of the other stuff I've played, and really one of those cases where a bit more polish in the controls and the mechanics could have brought this closer to a more authentic quality conversion job. Given what it is, I was surprised by how much I was actually enjoying this game, and not just on the basis of exploring some wacky bootleg thing. This was quite a bit of fun, and again, if some things were fixed up here and there, this almost comes close to being something quite decent. So, yeah, this one's not too shabby, which is nice because the next one we're gonna play, not so much. That's assuming the stupid thing doesn't crash on me again.